Hi, everybody. Welcome again to Move, Create, Practice Wednesdays with me, Paul. And today we're going to continue with a fun lesson with the feet, the ankles, and much more, everything that's connected, so our whole selves. And so we're going to do something with the feet. Yeah. So, how we've started. The past two lessons was to have a reference movement, and we can go back to the same one, which was this Tai Chi inspired pushing of the clouds just side to side. And you can do this in standing, and you just want to feel if there's some sort of power, tangibility of pushing. You can think clouds, or you can think very thick air, a balloon, and you just like pushing it from side to side. And especially if you're doing this on your feet, then feel how do your ankles, your feet come into play? Um, of course, you would be turning your chest, your whole torso, your pelvis with this movement. Or notice maybe you didn't start off doing that. But do you feel what your feet are doing? Maybe it's becoming clearer, or maybe it'll become really clear after we finish the lesson. So I think another fun thing, since I have a dance background, we can also, as a reference movement, we can move into some sort of dance, however you dance, to your favorite music. Um, I'm thinking a bit about salsa, a little bit of the cha-cha, or you just find your groove and see how that is. Do you like to twist, to rotate, to turn? How is your neck? How do your hips feel, your knees? Maybe when you're dancing, your brain changes channels, and somehow what didn't feel so great before all of a sudden feels more free. You just feel more connected when you find your own groove. Okay, so now let's begin the lesson, and please lie on your back. So hopefully you have a mat to lie on or some soft carpet, but it's fine if you just, lie on the floor. Hopefully it's not too cold, not too hard, but just lie on something comfortable and just have a scan of yourself. Just check in and see how you are feeling. Mhm. And notice as well how you're breathing. And is that feeling full? Is it very rapid? Is it slowing down as you take the time to lie on the floor? And notice how you feel in your hip joints without necessarily moving. And you can scan yourself with your legs long or your feet standing if that's better for your lower back. And just feel without really moving. Can you tell if there's a different texture or consistency from one hip joint to the other? Does one hip just feel looser, the other one not so? Yeah. And can you actually come and stand on your knees for a second? Yeah. So you'd come to stand on your knees so that your pelvis would be over your knees, so you're not sitting on your heels. And um, the word that I learned to describe this movement is called kipping, apparently. in German. So then you would just let the hip joints break a little bit so that you bend in the hip joints so that your pelvis will fold over the thigh bones, and so that you just drop your pelvis backwards a little bit towards your heels. So it's like, oops, that kind of feeling. Oopsie daisies. And just feel how clear do your hip joints feel. So just do that a few times, and you might notice that one hip is your go-to hip, or you just feel that you rely more on that hip to fold. It's clearer somehow. So just make a small movement, let the head be free, and feel as you bring the hip joints, you break the hip joints a little bit, what happens to your neck, your chest? Do you close your chest, or do you actually bring your chest out, forwards and up to keep your balance? And once you've done that a few times, actually come back up to standing and just see how it is back in standing. Did that movement of breaking in the hip joints and then sitting a bit towards your heels, did that produce a different sensation in standing? Did that already clarify your hip joints more? Are you a bit more grounded? Did your breathing change? And just go for a walk. And see, do you articulate your walk differently? Do you feel that there's more clarity in how you bend in the hip joints, extend them? Did that change your ease in walking? So what we're doing a lot through these Feldenkrais lessons is to give ourselves more sensation about how we move, or different sensations of our different parts, and so that it informs another way that we move, improving it, making it easier. So then once you've walked around a bit, then please come back and lie on your back. And once you have returned onto your back, then just bend both knees and stand both feet on the floor. And just sense, how is the contact, or the feeling of support of your right foot on the floor compared to the left foot on the floor? Which foot do you feel like you would push more readily into, to roll to one side? And then you can let the pelvis, you can push into one foot and then the other, have the pelvis roll a bit. So you don't need to roll the pelvis a lot from side to side, but it's just to get a feeling of that initial connection. Which foot seems to give you more immediate connection through the floor, so that you can use the floor to roll your pelvis a bit right and left. And as you do this, do you feel that maybe one foot feels a bit stronger, that you might even be able to, you rely more on it to lift your pelvis up? So now, just leave your pelvis be, and with your right foot, we're going to work with your right foot for a while. And last week we lifted the inside edge of the foot, the outside edge. And this week we're going to do another movement with the foot. So with your right foot, can you start sliding your toes, the toes of your right foot, can you start sliding them to the right and then to the left, keeping your heel as the pivot point? And you can start very small. See if you can start with very little effort. And then gradually, maybe it's just a little nudge of the toes to the right, a little nudge of the toes to the left, a beginning of sliding the toes of your right foot, right and left. And just see, how do you make that movement lighter and lighter? And then gradually make it a bit bigger, but without straining, without having to push through anything. And see, where have you distributed the weight underneath your right foot? Are you resting more on the heel so that your toes are liberated to slide from side to side? And then observe your breathing as you do this. Can you just let the air come in and out as it wishes? And so you can approach this with a very nonchalant attitude. So you can continue breathing as you slide the toes of your right foot smoothly from side to side. Great. So now, can you do the opposite and keep the toes of your right foot more or less where they are, or as the pivot? Yeah. And then can you begin to slide your right heel right and left? And making this movement gentle and soft, and feel how it's not just the foot moving, but perhaps you will feel the lower leg turning, rotating, and that affects your right thigh as well. And you will feel the right thigh moving in the pelvis, and perhaps it makes your pelvis roll a bit from side to side, that the weight shifts a bit from one side to another. And then as you continue to slide the right heel from side to side, can you also have a sense of what your chest, your ribs might be doing? Are they participating at all? Your neck? Does your head remain still, or does your head wish to? Is your head affected by the movement of sliding your right heel from side to side? So then experience the third option of sliding your foot in this way, turning your foot to slide this way. So can you slide the heel and the toes at the same time, but in opposite directions? So then you have the pivot point more in the center of your foot. And so when the toes, they slide to the right, your heel will come to the left, to the inside. And as the toes slide to the left, to the inside, the heel will slide outwards. And just play with this movement. You don't have to be doing a good job. You just play and see how in playing you are sensing, where can I make the movement easier? And in this wondering, in this pondering, you'll just begin to improve the movement. And see, to make the foot available, the right foot available to slide in this way, where the toes go one way and the heel goes in the other way, if you distribute the weight differently over your back, if there's some places of your spine, of your ribs, some of the ribs, do they actually become lighter on the floor, and you lean somewhere else so that your right foot frees up to slide, toes one way, the heel one way, the other way. So the toes and the heel go in opposite directions, using the center of your right foot as the pivot. Okay. And then just let that go. Have your both legs long, and just sense, how is the feeling of the right leg? Is there a change in the sensation of length? Does it feel different in the right hip joint? Do you notice any changes maybe to the right shoulder, your breathing? So whatever you sense is different. It's yours, and it's not this. Everyone has their own individual experience and response to these movements. So just to be very, very clear, if you roll through one side and just come and look at the screen. So I'm going to use my right hand to represent my foot. And just to clarify what I mean by sliding the toes from side to side, it's to do a movement, keeping the heel as the pivot. You want to slide the toes this way. Yeah. And so I said this might be a novel way of cleaning. So you can think that you're cleaning the floor with the toes by sliding them left and right. And then you keep the toes more as the pivot. And then you slide the heel from side to side, cleaning the floor with your heel. More like that. And then the last way is to keep the center of the foot as the pivot, so that you're there. So the center of the foot as the pivot, and then you slide the toes one way, the heel goes to the other side, and as you slide the toes inwards, then the heel will go outwards. So 3 ways. First with the pivot on the heel, sliding the toes. Second way is keeping the pivot with the toes, and then you slide the heel. And then you keep the center point of your foot as the center, and then you slide the toes and the heel of the right foot in opposite directions. So why don't you come back to your back, stand both feet again, and just play with the different variations, these 3 different variations. So maybe in seeing this, that you will be doing the movement differently. Maybe it helps. And maybe you feel more as you do it. So a few times sliding the toes, side to side, keeping the heel as the pivot. And it doesn't have to be super exact, but you want to be as, as differentiated as you can be, whatever is easy at this moment. And then you keep the toes more still, keeping the toes more as the pivot point, and you slide the heel from side to side. And notice how your pelvis, your chest might respond a bit differently as you do this. Yeah. And the big thing is to just keep your spine, your ribs also available for breathing. So as you continue to breathe easily, can you now slide the toes and the heel in opposite directions? So the third way, having the center of your right foot as the pivot point, and then you slide the heel and the toes in opposite directions. Yes, great. Okay, and then let that go. Take a rest. Yeah. So now, having both legs long, and you can do this with both legs long, or you can have the left foot standing. But we're going to continue with the right foot. So either with the left leg also long or the left foot standing, you want to have the right leg long, and you want to turn the toes up towards the ceiling so that the right leg is parallel. And then with the right leg parallel, and you can bend your ankle backwards, so flex in the ankle as if you're standing on something, just slightly. And then can you begin to slide again? Bring your toes right and left. So they're like windshield wipers. Back to the idea of cleaning. So then you bring the toes once to the right, once to the left, and you continue alternating like this. So you'll be rolling over your heel, the back of your heel. And notice how this movement happens differently. So now with the right leg long, do you feel how you're actually rotating in your right hip joint? And for your toes to just go a little bit further from one side to another. Feel when does the leg stop in your hip joint, and then you can go a bit further by allowing your pelvis to roll. So always inviting more of your, if you find that the movements get a bit more difficult, maybe you just have to take some time and understand how more of you can participate, can join in. And feel as the pelvis starts to roll a bit, what happens in the chest? Does the chest roll a bit as well? Does this affect how you lean behind how you distribute the weight behind your chest? The spine, the place between your two shoulder blades, your ribs. And is there also some sense of shortening on one side of your chest and then lengthening on the other side of the chest? So is there some sort of shortening and lengthening of the two sides of your chest as you bring the toes right and left? Great. And if you need to take a short break, then just let your legs be easy. Just take a break. So then come back with the right leg long and have the toes facing towards the ceiling. So the right leg is back in parallel. And this time you're going to play with the idea of keeping the toes again more still, more or less in space. And you're going to slide the heel from side to side. And see, how does that feel? Keeping the toes more or less in space. And so the heel swings a bit like a pendulum underneath the toes. So the heel will brush to the inside, brush to the outside, and you continue doing this. And do it lightly enough so that you can do this for a few repetitions, so that you get this chance to observe, to sense, to taste what's going on in your ribs, your shoulders, your pelvis, your whole spine and neck. Are you able to continue breathing, doing this? And if you feel that you're struggling a bit, then just make the movement a bit smaller until you feel you can sense, this place maybe can come with me, this place in my chest, my shoulder, my neck. And if you'd like more information, I always invite people to either have their hands rest on their chest somewhere so that you can just have your hands give you extra sensation, some extra feedback as to what your chest is doing, or you can place it on your belly, on your pelvis. And then now try the third option, which is toes and heels. Toes and heel of your right foot going in opposite directions. So as the toes of your right foot go to the outside, the heel will swing to the inside. So you keep the center of the foot as the pivot. And as the toes come inwards, the heel moves the same amount outwards. And maybe, is this the way of moving that you feel your chest and your pelvis involved the most? And just allow yourself to loosen up and see how you can make the movement of the toes and the heels going in opposite directions, how you can make this movement soft and easy the whole way through. Does your head feel like rolling? You can allow your head to roll if that makes the movement easier. Yeah. do whatever you have to. So a lot of what we're doing is also going beyond what we think the movement should be, or what we think we should or shouldn't be doing. So it's a lot of trial and error here, and I guess we're in a safe place to make mistakes in order to learn, to improve. So let that go. If you've had your left foot standing, then just let your left leg be long. And take a moment and notice what's changed, what feels different. Or maybe this moment is for you to just realize, that you have another idea about how your foot can be moving and how that relates, how that requires the support of everything upstairs. So, bend your knees, stand your feet, stand both feet on the floor, and just feel how the right foot is standing compared to the left foot. Is there any noted difference? And now just lift your right foot off the floor so that the lower leg is just, of your right leg, the lower leg is just hanging, dangling in the air. And you can have your right knee closer to your chest, somewhere so that your right leg is just in space, relaxed. And you can have your right knee, see, are you bringing your right knee close to your chest, in a very parallel position, or does your right knee want to drift more, wander to the right, so that it's a bit more open? And does that make it easier for you to just have your leg resting in the air like this? So you're not using your thigh muscles, your lower leg is just dropped, it's just dangling. And like this, just have your right ankle bent backwards enough, flexed enough so that you can begin to bring the toes again of your right foot, right and left, keeping the heel as the pivot point. So it's almost like your foot is saying, waving goodbye, or it's cleaning some imaginary panel of glass. And just the toes slide right and left. And do you sense all of the toes as you do this? Or do you have favorites? Are you thinking more about the pinky or the big toe? Yeah. How about the 3 toes in the middle? And feel how the movement, it spreads through the bones of your whole leg into the hip joint, and feel any shifts of the weight behind the pelvis and your back, the chest. And then try to keep the toes more or less in space, and then bring the heel outwards and inwards. That's it. So it's exactly what you had been doing with the foot on the floor, sliding the heel out and in, but you have the right foot in the air so that the lower leg is just dangling. Yeah. And how do you feel this movement of the heel going out and in? How does that ripple into your hip joints, your pelvis, your back, shoulders and neck? And at any point you need to rest, just bring the right foot down, stand, and just continue to imagine the movement. And when you feel ready, you can join again. So then, with the right lower leg still dangling, can you turn the toes inwards and then bring the heel outwards, and then bring the toes outwards and turn the heel inwards, so that the pivot point is at the center of your foot. And let yourself, again, use less effort And so that you don't get tired and you actually find a way of resting in this movement. How can you do a lot and in a very refined manner so that you have more power, you have more durability, sustainability without using much effort? And if you want to revisit the three strategies, just use a bit of time and see how are the three different. What do you feel when you're just sliding the toes right and left? How is it to just slide the heel right and left, inside and outside, outward and inwards? And then what is it like to bring the heel and the toes in opposite directions? Yeah. What does that mean differently in your torso? And if you can't really put words to it, that's completely fine. But as long as you are feeling that something is going on, and then perhaps it'll become clearer and clearer as to what you're doing, in which directions things are moving in. So just stand your right foot on the floor, and then take a rest. So just bend your knees again, have both soles of the feet standing on the floor. And maybe before we go to the last variation, just think about it. So it's the same three ways of moving your foot. First, sliding the toes right and left. And maybe you can just try that out again with your right foot standing on the floor. And just slide the toes outwards and inwards, keeping the heel more or less where it is. And then it's going to be the heel in and out. And if you're trying these movements, see if it has gotten easier, a bit clearer. And then the last variation, or the last way of moving your foot, is sliding the toes outwards as the heel comes inwards, and then the toes inwards as the heel slides outwards. And so now you're just going to do these movements with your right leg, the lower leg, the right lower leg is going to be parallel to the floor, so that you lift the right foot off the floor and you raise the right foot to the same level as your knee, so that the lower leg is going to be parallel to the ceiling and to the floor. And then you bend your ankle back a bit as well, flexing the ankle a bit. And then just try these three different variations. Let the knee move. See, when does the pelvis feel like joining? Yeah. So maybe you want to start with another variation. Maybe it's easier for you to move the heel outwards and inwards. Or maybe it's easier for you to move the toes and the heels in opposition. So just play around. Do a few movements with each way, so that you begin to become clearer. You're able to distinguish the differences in the sensation of each of these three variations. Notice if the movement travels all the way up through the spine to your neck. Is there any bending from one side to another of your head? Does your chin move? How do you feel the movement of the foot in your right hip joint, or even your left hip joint? And when you've had enough, just stand your right foot on the floor, sense how it is, and then let your legs go long, and then take another rest. And just feel how are you noticing your right side compared to the left. What are the changes that you might be tuning into? And gently, just let your head roll a bit to the right and let your head roll a bit to the left. Is there some sort of difference in ease between rolling the head from one side or to one side and then rolling it to the other? Great. So bend your knees again, stand both feet on the floor, and start with, we're going to go to the left foot now. Or before we do that, just again, push a little bit into the right foot, a little bit into the left foot. Just notice if there's you have a different connection through the right foot compared to the left. Yeah. Is there a different sense of support as well? So let's finally come to the left side, the left foot. So let's begin. Why don't we start with the heel, in fact? So can you slide the left heel a bit inwards and outwards? So once to the right, once to the left, and keep going a few times and make this movement nice and comfortable. Is it already easier with the left foot because you've done this on the right foot? Or is your left foot the more challenging foot? Waiting to learn, to improve. And just meditate a bit on this movement of the left heel going inwards and outwards. And just be curious as to how this is happening in your left hip joint. Or first your lower leg. Can you feel how your lower leg is turning on your left leg? Feeling what happens, how the knee wishes to move, the left hip joint. And as you continue to breathe, letting the air go out and come in as you slide the heel outwards and inwards, then just feel along your spine, upwards, through the chest, into the shoulders, the neck. And at any moment, you can use your hands on your pelvis, your chest, your belly, just to give you some extra tactile information. And then keep the heel more still and pivot around the heel and slide your toes of the left foot from side to side. Yeah. Making it easy. Great. And can you just keep your toes towards the outside and just stay there and breathe. Allow yourself to slow down even more and make sure that you can breathe with your toes facing to the outside. And then bring the left toes towards the inside. And then there again, just layering on this possibility of being able to breathe. I think about a lot of the Feldenkrais lessons as like a musical track. If you've ever edited music or video, that you have different tracks that all run parallel to each other. So even though you're making movements with just the foot, there's the track of your breathing, there's a track of your attention, maybe the track of or maybe the track of how your chest moves, your ribs. Yeah. So that the breathing can be continuous as you resume sliding your toes of the left foot from side to side. And then have the center of your left foot as the pivot, and then slide the toes outwards and the heel comes inwards, and then the toes slide inwards as your heel slides outwards. Just see the places that that accompany this movement, that are a byproduct, let's say, of the foot's moving in this way. Great. And take a rest. Then have your left leg remaining long, and you can keep the right leg long, or you can stand the right foot if that gives you better support. And now, can you just roll over your left heel so that the toes of your left foot are facing towards the ceiling, your left leg is parallel, and then you just bring the toes to the inside and to the outside. You have your left ankle flexed enough so that this movement of sliding your toes from side to side is clear. So your toes are facing towards the ceiling. And you roll over the back of your left heel so that the toes can come to the inside and outside. Sensing how your leg turns, it rotates in your left hip joint. And then play again with sliding the heel underneath the toes so that the toes will stay more or less roughly in the same place, so that the heel becomes the bottom end of the pendulum, and it goes inwards and outwards. And feel, where do you find support? Behind your shoulders, your head, your pelvis, so that the sliding from side to side of your left heel becomes easy. Not straining in your breathing. Does this make you arch your back a bit more? Does that help? So try different things. And then just go and explore the toes and the heel moving in opposite directions. So your toes will also be moving. They're not in the same place anymore. As the heel goes inwards, the toes move outwards. And as the heel goes outwards, the toes of your left foot come inwards. So your leg continues to turn in the left hip joint, but then your pelvis perhaps will also move. And you might feel not only is your chest, the weight behind your chest is shifting from side to side, but you might also feel this shortening on one side of your chest as the other side lengthens, so that there's a bit of bending, side bending in the chest. And how does this affect the length and dimension of your spine through the neck and the head? Does your head want to turn because your neck feels this movement? Or does your head swivel, meaning that your chin goes a little bit to the left, it swings a bit left and right? Okay, and let it go. Yeah, just see, how is the left side coming along? Nice. So just feel your breathing again. Just observe, has it become more quiet or has it become more excited? And just continue observing your breathing as you bend both knees and come to stand both feet again on the floor. See if you can continue to just keep track of your breathing. Maybe you disturb your breathing a bit, and so what? But you're just observing your breathing. And then lift the left foot off the floor softly and keep the lower leg of your left leg just hanging in the air. Find a comfortable place for your left knee to be, closer to the chest or coming a bit to the outside. And so your lower leg is hanging, and you flex again the ankle of your left foot of the left leg. And now again, visit these 3 different variations in your own time. First, keeping the heel more or less in space, and you slide the toes from one side to the other, inside and outside. So it's that the toes of your left foot help. It's like waving goodbye again, wiping from side to side. Then play with the heel going from the inside to the outside. And can all these movements have a very even pace to them so that you don't really accelerate at any point? You feel how the entire process, smooth process of bringing the heel from side to side, keeping the toes of the left foot more or less in place, the pendulum again. So now let's go with the toes and the heel moving in opposite directions. Just feel how this is a whole self movement. I spoke about this principle in Tai Chi, of how one movement equals 100 movements. That when one thing moves, everything else moves to keep the balance of the whole person, the whole system. So notice all the places, the bones of your left leg, your left hip and right hip. Yeah, and just play around with it. You might want to visit some of the other variations. Maybe you want to go back to the toes side to side. And yeah, continue to observe the 100 movements all over yourself. And if you only notice 1 or 2 things, that's great. You can do these movements at home whenever you want. Great. And just stand your left foot on the floor. Just see how it comes back, literally, onto earth. Does your left foot support you differently? And then let your legs go long, or you can rest to take a rest, or you can just keep the feet standing to rest. Okay. And so you all know what's coming next. And maybe to just not tire yourself out, you can start to think about, visualize, ponder on the movements of your left foot, but thinking about the movement with the left lower leg parallel to the floor, parallel to the ceiling, so that the left foot is at the same level as your left knee. And then you think about the toes sliding from side to side. Great. And then think about the heel from side to side. And then lastly, the toes and the heel in opposite directions. And while you think about the foot moving like this, do you also have an inkling of what happens in your spine, your pelvis, your chest, the shoulders, your everything? And if you want to continue thinking more than doing, please feel free to do so. But if you're itching to try it out, then bend your knees, stand both feet on the floor, then raise your left foot away from the floor. Have your left knee somewhat over your chest or your belly, and then have the left foot at the same height as your left knee, and then flex a bit in the left ankle, and then start exploring these 3 different variations. Just the toes in and out, a few times the heel in and out, and then the heel and the toes moving in opposite directions. And just take take a moment to explore in your own way. So everyone becomes more and more, becomes clearer about their personal way of learning, of acquiring information, of testing, experimenting in order to gain new knowledge. So respect that. And maybe you just have to do a few times of one variation, change to the next variation, the other variation. So for maybe it's not so much about refining the movements, but refining the sensation of the difference of how each of these three variations of your foot affect your whole self differently, how it brings your whole self into movement differently. Okay, so let that go. Rest with your legs long, and just roll your head a little bit from side to side. See how that is now. Gently, not forcing anything. And then just let your head stay in the center, and then just feel your breathing, your contact with the floor. And just a bit, just take a moment again to feel the hips, the length of your legs. And then we're just going to go a little bit brisker. Yeah. So with your legs long, can you turn both of your toes up towards the ceiling? So both legs now are parallel. And just bring the toes together to the inside and bring the toes outwards. And just make this movement more and more comfortable. Not pushing, and just feel how the two legs are rotating inwards and rotating outwards. But what does that do to your lower back? Or do you actually feel the movements of bringing your toes in and out affecting the curve of your neck? Does it make your head roll? Does the weight shift behind your skull? Do you lean differently on your chest depending on where if your toes are facing each other, or if your toes are facing apart? So then keep the toes more still in space, and then move the heels in and out like a pendulum. See how that is. Yeah, make mistakes. It's not about finding what you think is the right way, but in exploring, you'll find what works better for you, and how you can coordinate. Yeah, maybe you'll find that your lower back, your pelvis rolls in a way that your lower back feels like it rounds towards the floor, and then as the heel moves in another direction, that your pelvis rolls towards your tailbone, and then your lower back will lift away from the floor, arching a bit more. And then the heels and the toes in opposite directions, but you always bring the toes together to face each other, and then your toes away from each other. And when the toes are facing each other, the heels slide away, slide further apart to the outside, and as the toes go to the outside, the heels would come together, or they would, be closer to each other. They don't have to touch. And then please leave that. Rest again. And bend your knees and stand your feet. And in a restful manner, if you can, begin to explore the movements of bringing your toes towards each other and your toes apart, keeping the heels as the pivot. what does this mean for your spine on the floor? Does this again make the weight behind your pelvis roll towards your tailbone and towards your lower back, raising and lowering your lower back? How does it affect your neck? Then a few times the heels together, the heels apart. Yes. Feeling the movement of the sternum for breathing as well, right? And the movement, perhaps having availability in your belly to breathe. And then the heels and the toes in opposite directions, but always the toes coming together. And then as the toes move away from each other, the heels come closer towards each other and just alternate. And try a few different speeds. Maybe you do have to go a bit faster. For some people, it's just easier to get the gist a bit quicker. And some people need to go at a snail's pace. Again, we're all different. Good. So just keep your feet in standing. Breathe. And then raise both feet off the floor and continue to let your lower legs just hang. Have your knees either bent up closer towards your chest or over your belly. Somewhere where you feel your legs are just resting, yeah, with the knees bent, lower legs hanging. And then flex your ankles enough so that you can be clear about bringing the toes inwards, toes outwards, keeping your heels, again, as the pivot points. And when do your knees feel like they want to open to the side? When do your knees feel like they want to close in towards the center? So that there's a movement of the lower legs rotating and then in and out. And then bring the heels towards each other and then the heels apart, keeping your toes more or less in space. And how do you feel this movement change the space underneath your lower back? Sensing the whole contact of the back and the spine, how it may shift with this movement. And then lastly, the toes and the heels in opposition, but always bringing the toes inwards at the same time and the heels inwards at the same time when the toes face outwards. Yeah, maybe try a bit quicker and just see how the movement ripples, passes through the legs into the pelvis, all the way up to your head. Great. And then, yeah, bring your feet down. Just let your legs be long for a second. Take another rest. So, bend your knees again and raise your feet off of the floor and have the lower legs parallel. And find a comfortable position to be in. Maybe you want the feet a bit closer, your knees further apart, or maybe you're comfortable with your lower legs with their parallel. And so the lower legs are parallel to the ceiling and the floor. And then now, can you start again with just the toes in and out? And so you take your whatever time you need, and if it's tiring to have your lower legs always parallel, then you just do a few movements, just be clear in a few movements. I'm moving my toes in and out. Then I'm moving my heels in and out, keeping my toes where they are as the pivot points. And then go with the toes and the heels in opposition. Toes meeting in the middle, and then the heels meeting in the middle. and feeling when do you tend to arch in the back, when do you extend in the lower back, when does your neck raise or your chin raise, when does your chin come closer towards your chest. Just letting all the other parts just follow. What makes the movement easy? Great. And then just place your feet on the floor and try and just revisit a few of these variations with both feet on the floor. You can move both feet at once, or you can move one foot and then the other foot, and just see if you're better at, you have better skill, more grasp at just doing what you want to be doing with your feet. Whether it's the toes you want to be moving more, or the heels. Yes. And finally, just let your legs be long. Feel how you are. How are you making contact with the floor now? Do you have more contact than before? Than when you first laid down? And roll your head a bit from side to side. Is that feeling better, easier? Then please roll through one side and then come back to your knees. So you stand on your knees again. Yeah. So the pelvis is off your heels and you're standing over your knees. And then just do that movement of allowing your hip joints to break a bit. Poof. So that your hip joints fold. It's like you just do a mini fall. And feel, how do you feel your hip joints now? Are they clearer? Do you feel more solid or softer in the hip joints? And then come onto your feet. And what's your first impression back in standing? How do you feel yourself? Are you more weighted? Or do you feel lighter? Do you tend to be still, or are you ready to get going and move? So just have a walk around first. We're just going to look at a few things back in standing, and then we'll be finished. So see, how is it to walk now? Do you feel like you have better hip joints? Maybe even better ankles? How's your balance and stability? And then just stand again and go back to the pushing of the clouds from side to side. Is it more evident how your feet are actually involved, your ankles? And are you able to maybe even turn a bit more easily in the hips, in the ankles from side to side? Do you feel like you have more strength that you could actually maybe not push a mountain, but maybe push a hill a little bit, side to side? Great. And if that was not, hopefully you felt that was interesting, but if you're not inclined to towards the martial arts, then just see, how do you groove? How are you dancing? Are you becoming more of a salsa dancer? Are you just you're inventing your own kind of dance? Yeah, how do you feel in your hips, your knees, your ankles, your neck? What is the quality of your flavor right now? How's the chest, your expressivity? And do you feel that you can be more creative with yourself, that you've got more to find strength on the dance floor, being more creative and just feeling great, maybe even fabulous? So I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and looking forward to sharing more next week. And if there are any questions or any comments, then please feel free to leave them in the comment section, and this video will also be available as a replay. So if you've, yeah, if you have any friends and family who would be interested in doing this, then they can access this by joining the group. And yeah, have a very lovely day. See you next time.